from Chicago, it's Startup Hype Man, the podcast. What's up, everyone? My name is Raj Nation, founder and chief pitch artist at Startup Hype Man, where we help startups, scale-ups, and grown-ups not suck at how they pitch themselves so they stand out to their audience and stand apart from the competition. This podcast is all about bringing you the hearts, the minds, and the stories of leaders in the startup ecosystem, talking through the strategies they have deployed in order to build and grow their companies. And it's officially season 17 of the show, and all season long we've got a special treat for you, bringing you guests exclusively from the Startup Hype Man client portfolio, giving you a piece of their journey. Before we begin, if you're not a subscriber yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And remember, you can catch all the episodes from our 17-season archive and learn how to pitch your startup at startuphypeman.com. All right, get your popcorn ready and get hyped because it's go time. Ladies and gentlemen, making her way to the microphone from Hyde Point and currently residing in Hyde Point, North Carolina. She is the founder of Masters of Ring Entertainment. Please welcome Bambi Weavil.
Hey, that's an incredible intro. Good job.
Well, I feel like, you put on a show where other people get that introduction. So if you come on my show, it's only fair that you get that kind of an introduction.
Oh, absolutely. That's awesome. Thanks for having me.
Of course, she is once again Bambi Weavil. All this season on Startup Hype Man, the podcast, we are featuring different founders who are within the Startup Hype Man client portfolio. We have the honor of working with Bambi and Masters of Ring Entertainment not too long ago. And Masters of Ring Entertainment is an independent wrestling promotion, which if you know me, you know that that whole category is near and dear to my heart. More for short, Masters of Ring Entertainment, More Wrestling has had some of the most legendary names in the wrestling business appear on their shows. The likes of WWE Hall of Famers Trish Stratus and Amy Dumas, or Lita, as she's more popularly known. They've also had Larry Zbysko, Jeff Jarrett, upcoming shows featuring the likes of Kurt Angle, AEW star Penta, Cero, Miedo, and the Steiner brothers. These are heavy hitters in the wrestling business. And if you're not familiar with pro wrestling, I'll tell you, any pro wrestling fan will know not only all of these people's names, but they can tell you at least 5 different matches that they can recite in their head that they've seen these wrestlers compete in before. And the topic that we're going to talk about with Bambi today is something that, even though it's kind of like her experience within the wrestling business, I think everyone can relate to this and apply it to their own unique situations in the startup journey. And that topic is building relationships with hard to reach people. Bambi, why is this on your mind and why is this important to you?
Because, it's not always easy to break into a business, especially for me as a woman, I'm still a minority. I'm a minority of a minority. I'm half Asian. I'm half Caucasian. So, especially in wrestling where it's you have to be in the circle, in the family, you have to earn trust before you even start. And then even as you're going, you're having to prove yourself. So it's very important. I've spent my whole career doing this. So it only made sense to do it in pro wrestling.
Now, we're going to dive a whole lot more into this topic, how you've been able to, carve your spot in the industry and make these connections with what is really a closed door industry traditionally. Before we get into all of that, let's learn a little bit more about Bambi, the person. And what I want to know off the bat here, Bambi, is your first pro wrestling memory.
Ooh. Oh, well, as a fan on TV, I remember growing up watching Glow, Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, right? Watching WCW, NWA. I was a child of the 80s, WWF at the time. But my first true live event memories were going to Raw in Fayetteville, North Carolina, when they were doing the marathon TV tapings. So seeing stunning Steve Austin at the time, ringmaster, go in and just whip it, all these matches in a row for King of the Ring tournament. This was like around 96 or whatnot. So it was an incredible time to be a wrestling fan. And I was very fortunate to grow up with my family who watched wrestling. So this was our family time was pro wrestling and NFL football. That was our thing. Right. So I had that background. My sister, same thing for her. She grew up loving it. So we're very fortunate. One of us could have broke off and said, "Oh, wrestling's stupid," but that didn't happen.
As many people, hit a point in their life when they hit like 14 years old and they're like, I can't watch this anymore. For society told them they shouldn't watch it anymore. So they stopped, right?
There's always closet wrestling fans. There's probably some closet wrestling fans on here listening. So,
oh yeah, totally.
It happens. I see it all the time. There's really no shame in it. It's a great business. People risk their health. This is their livelihood. It's very serious. It's predetermined, yes, but not fake. So
what I always laugh about when is two things. One, it's not only that there are so many quote unquote closet wrestling fans, it's that when you find each other out in the open, you can't believe that the other person exists. And it's all you want to do is geek out over that thing. And it's so almost anywhere you go, you can just do a Ric Flair woo out loud in public. And you're almost guaranteed to get a random woo in return from someone else who just happens to be in the square or wherever they might be. Right. The other thing that I think is so incredible about this is that, when people say, oh, it's fake, right? And I just I'll say, well, it's scripted. It's not fake. But on top of that, I'm like, yeah, but do you know the funniest thing about all of this is that when we as wrestling fans comment on what we're watching, we say, I can't believe the writers booked them that way. Right? We talk about it through the lens of the production of the show itself, because we know it's a production. But you know what no one says? Oh, I can't believe the writers booked Phoebe to not fall in love with Ross. And they picked, no, they say, oh, I can't believe Ross and Rachel ended up getting to, right? I can't believe Phoebe. Right? So it's we understand it as a production. Whereas whenever anyone else watches any other type of content, they treat it as if it is the real thing. So it's we've got the wool pulled. We've got the upper hand on everybody as wrestling fans.
Except for the Oscars. This thing with Will Smith and Chris Rock has been very pro wrestling So it's.
I was trying to explain that. We were at an Oscars friend's Oscars party, and I was literally trying to explain to everyone there. I was like, "This is pro wrestling. The fact that we are debating was this supposed to happen or not? This was it kayfabe or was it a shoot or what?"
It was the most strangest thing. I'm surprised WWE hasn't taken any shots at it yet. Maybe they will over WrestleMania.
Vince McMahon seems like someone who would easily capitalize on that.
But fans are very invested in pro wrestling. And I always say, there is no fan base like pro wrestling on the planet, bar none. People know it in and out, sometimes too much. Business is not protected enough, I'm afraid to say. People forget that you need to have a surprise. Yeah. So when you have that genuine reaction, you didn't read about it on a dirt sheet. So it's important to try to don't read every little bit and take it at face value. Not all of it's true. So
right. I'm with you on that. I actually, one of my friends, we kind of have this pact that our goal is to try and just enjoy it and not enjoy it through the lens of analyzing it, but just enjoy it through the lens of being a fan. And I really, unless, because it's hard to avoid if I don't know, because Google, knows everything about you when they show you the article that they think you'd want to see. In which case I'm clicking, but otherwise, I make an effort to not proactively seek out spoilers or anything like that. Cause I don't know if you recall, this would have been 5-6 years ago at this point, in WWE, Shane McMahon made his return. Right. And that pop was crazy. And watching it at home, I was like, oh my God. And then that feeling of really genuinely being surprised is a good feeling to have. And I like that more than saying, yep, I read about that. I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I think it's important to allow yourself to be a fan. When I go to WrestleMania week, I'm trying not to be a promoter at that point. I just want to take it in and I want to just remember why I love this business. Because sometimes when you're caught up in the day to day, sometimes you don't love it as much, and it does require love to be in pro wrestling. It is a love-hate relationship sometimes, but at the end of the day, you really do love it, to do what you do.
On that note, I am curious to hear, once you're kind of behind the curtain in life, if you will, with whatever industry that you're in, it's hard to let me phrase this a better way. I work with a lot of startups on their pitch to where it's nearly impossible for me to see a pitch anywhere and not automatically go into analysis mode of it versus just truly sitting back and absorbing it. In the wrestling business, do you find it hard, let's say you just attend an event as a fan, it's not an event you put on, you attend someone else's event. Are you able to sit there and just watch it as a fan, or are you actually like breaking down in your head how the match is constructed and all like the behind the scenes stuff?
I find myself, I do two things. I like to watch the crowd. I want to see how they're reacting. I want to see what they got out of it. And then I can't help but think I'm scouting when I watch a match. Like, do I want to put this person on my show at some point? Whether I can truly get them now, if I'm at an AEW show or if I'm at a WWE show one day, will I work with this person? Because it's much different to see it on TV than it is to see it live. And it's hard because you're watching for every little nuance, but at the same time, I've been to WrestleManias. I'm not obviously going to this one this time, but I like to just sit back and be a fan, especially during WrestleMania, the biggest show, the Super Bowl of pro wrestling. I remember being, I think it was Orlando or Miami. I don't know which city, when the Hardys came. And I remember
that was a huge reveal.
Yeah. And there's the other moment I remember, what blew me away was when The Undertaker retired in New Orleans. It was just this unbelievable, I think it was New Orleans. It was unbelievable. The audience was truly like, I think it was Florida that same night. It was truly like,
no, that was the same. Like when he put the tape in the ring and everything.
It was about a midnight show. We were all pretty tired. Yeah. Like it was really shocking. Yeah.
But then he just came back anyways.
He still came back. But at the time we're like, this is it. And that's the one time probably the whole business felt like a fan, because you're like, this is the Undertaker and this is a big deal.
Right. Now, and you mentioned like you're watching the crowd and everything like that. One thing even I've observed in myself the last few years as I've gotten into ring announcing is I very closely watch the posture of the ring announcer, for example. How are they using intonation in certain ways to get one person over versus make one person be the bad guy or the bad girl. And even I think what's interesting is seeing different production elements, right? Which I think you'll notice too. Like when I watch AEW on TV, which for those who don't know, that's of the last 3 years, the bigger startup wrestling that's kind of formed competition as compared to the WWE, and it's on TBS here in the United States. I even will pick up on, I don't necessarily or I think they could improve on the fact that they don't leave any gap of time between when one wrestler's song ends and the next one begins. And I'm like, if they had a 2-second pause there, they could build a little bit of energy before the next person's music hits.
Right. It's good to study. I mean, we all can learn, including the big boys, so it's in this business, especially in pro wrestling and in any business, obviously there's people listening right now that are not in pro wrestling or have nothing to do with pro wrestling. You have to always be doing professional development. I find it to be very important.
I want to make sure our audience gets more than you and I just marking out on pro wrestling as an industry and as a sport during this show. So let me pull myself back here and let's get more into our main theme for today, which is building relationships with hard to reach people. And I think the best sort of jump off to this is, can you talk through the journey of how you had the concept for Masters of Ring Entertainment in the first place, and what is it like getting started in this industry, especially as you said, being a minority of a minority?
Yeah, it was almost a happy accident. It wasn't something I had told myself when I was in college that I was going to go become a promoter. That wasn't the plan. I went to school for, ironically, journalism and creative writing. And after, to give you guys a full scope of my career, I had jumped into marketing, and I spent the last 10 or so years doing nothing but social media marketing. At the time, toward the end of that, I had formed a partnership, and it didn't quite work out, but it gave me the courage to go forward with Masters Ring Entertainment. The name came from a friend of mine in the business. It was WCW's The Stro. He let me use the name. I thought, this is an amazing name. Can I use it? He let me use it, and the rest is history. But how I started out was I was at the time and going from New York City to Wilmington, North Carolina. And I thought, North Carolina is a good wrestling area. Always has been. Why not Wilmington? So I had intentionally thought this would be like a TV town. And so I developed shows in Wilmington. Didn't quite turn out that it would end up like that, at least for now. Maybe that will change. But, we spent a couple of years in Wilmington doing shows. I ended up going by myself with Masters at Ring Entertainment about a year or so in. And so I'm very proud of everything that I was able to accomplish in Wilmington and Kenansville, North Carolina. For you guys who don't know, it's Southeast North Carolina, where Michael Jordan grew up. So, it was a great place to learn and get better and develop these events. And now I'm relocated to High Point. So now we're doing our next big show in June.
Now, whether someone is a startup founder trying to get in front of investors, trying to get that, that big enterprise customer, or they're even just like a salesperson or a marketer who's trying to get a response to a cold email, let's say, right, from a potential customer, or whether it's pro wrestling, right, where pro wrestling is historically, as we said before, one of the most closed door. You have to know somebody, right? You have to have an in. You have to almost be born in the business, right, to get that in. How do you advise someone like start building relationships in what is perceivably this closed door type of industry? And I think that same thing applies like for startup founders who are trying to raise capital, right? The investment game is oftentimes in many places a closed door industry. So how do you advise getting started and building relationships in the first place?
I would say you have to make yourself memorable from the beginning, and you have to respect those who became before you. That's wrestling 101 and it's life 101. Certainly be able to go in and be proud of who you are, but stay humble and realize you're just starting out. And even though I've been doing marketing and sales now for, 11 years, every day I'm learning. Every day I'm trying to make sure I am following people that have done it very well, like Grant Cardone and others out there. With wrestling, no matter how many days you've been in it, there are people before you who have done it longer than you have, and they come from a family pedigree. So you have to respect the people that came before you. Don't, always be honest and ethical. I think it's very important to be a truth teller. There's a lot of, if I can be frank, BS that happens in life and in wrestling, and you've got to be discerning. And that goes for anyone's career. You have to be able to understand what you're looking at and take a step back. It's important not to be reactionary. As far as connections and how do you build up your portfolio, just be willing to meet people halfway and do what they don't expect you to do. Do something to give back to the business in some way. Wrestling is very circular. It can go up, it can go down, and so can marketing and sales. So, you just I think being memorable is a big part of it. Like I said, I think it's important to make yourself stand out, because just like in sales, for example, there's a lot of noise. People are getting approached all the time, and don't give up. It is not, wrestling especially is not a quick business. Many years, a lot of sweat, a lot of money being spent. You're going to get scars, from falling down, but what's worth it to you in the end? For me, it's to create memories. I want families to have memories with each other, friends to have memories with each other, and with our wrestlers. We are all connected. That's why we do this. It's not because wrestlers want to go beat each other up and potentially be crippled. It's not just about money, but it's about that relationship with fans and wrestlers and promoters. So if you do business the right way in wrestling or in life, you're going to be around. You're going to make it happen. You can't give up. It does require a lot of tenacity.
When we worked together on your pitch, I think, and that was really like the big angle that we took, right? Was like this idea, like Moore's unique value is this fan connection, right? Building relationships with fans, getting close to fans in a way that maybe other shows try and keep things separate, right? Like don't touch the wrestlers, don't talk to the wrestlers, stay away, right? You're doing like the exact opposite of that, which is let's all be in this together, right? Get that photo, have that conversation, etc. Sit very close, those kinds of things. As you were talking through that, through what you just said, there's two questions that came to mind for me. One of them is, you said, when you're starting out, it's like you've got to be able to stand out, but also be humble at the same time and know that you're just starting out. So when you think back to like, let's say the first show you were putting together, it's almost like it's different when Google wants to talk to anyone, because everyone has heard of the name Google before, right? Versus a company just getting started. So like, you're kind of just pitching an idea at that point, right? So how are you getting people to be part of this? How are you getting wrestlers involved in a promotion, in a league, if you will, that hasn't had a track record yet?
Your relationship building from what you potentially have done. In my situation, I had a background. I had worked with some wrestlers in the past from a marketing perspective, but I hadn't promoted, so really a lot of in the wrestling business, you're taking at face value until they physically work with you for the first time and they can say for themselves. However, obviously, if you're able to reference that you've worked with other people, you should certainly do that. In my situation, our first event was Jim Cornette, a legendary figure in pro wrestling. The concept he loved. And so we were able to say, okay, do you have any problem with any of these people we want to bring in? Just want to make sure it's all good. He had no issues, so like you want to take care of the people you're working with. You're putting on a production, you're putting on a show, and then bringing it to the people. You just want to take this idea that you believe in so much and you think it's going to work. And you say, look, we've never done it. It's a lasting legacy, a tribute to Jim Cornette. This is not a roast. This is an actual tribute event. We had Dan Severin as part of the MCs with Bill Apner. It's this incredible event. Tag team wrestlers is just very special, and so people did like the concept. They did want live wrestling. So we did a live wrestling show beforehand, a fan fest. So we had 2 events in one day. So it worked out really nicely. So, I mean, when you're trying to get out there and decide, with proof of concept, you just got to do it. If you believe in it, do it. And so like, we've always operated, my personal belief was, how would I feel if I were going to attend this event? Like I want to have that experience. I want the fan to know I've thought about them the whole time, like, are they going to get the most out of this event? Are they going to say at the end of the night, that was the best $40 or whatever it was I spent? And we still have incredible fan testimonials. We still have people talking about our shows from 3 years ago. Like you can't ask, there's no price tag on that, and I think if anybody that's building a startup and wants to think about how to get their dream across, you got to be willing to go all out, be willing to promote it, back it with all your heart. Make sure your pitch is more than just a pitch on paper. You got to live and breathe what you want to do. Do you want to work for somebody else or do you want to work for yourself? And so you make that conscious decision. You drive the bus. You have to help people believe in what you're doing. And that's what wrestling is. We make people believe. There's plenty of fans out there who really don't care that it's fake and they really believe that this is legitimate. And it is legitimate. It's just a matter of being predetermined. So a person's startup business is the same way. You've got a food truck. You feel strongly about it. Get it out there. Just do it. Prove it to yourself. And you can make changes. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to fail. I've failed. It's not fun, but you get up and you do it, and it makes you a better person. It makes you a better business person all the way around. So
you mentioned that with Jim Cornette, that was like the first person you took this to. You said he loved the concept. Do you recall what you were pitching to him as concept at that point?
Well, it was really like, we're going to do a tribute event for you. What do you think?
Hey, we want to make you look amazing. What do you think? Which is, wait, but that's right? You just kind of were like, we want to like put you on a platform essentially, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm like, this is not a roast. You want to be super clear because roasts have been done. Roasts happen, and, here who we have in mind, like this is who we feel are important to your career. So it was a bit of a collaboration, but he was game and he was a pleasure to work with. We have nothing but positive things to say about Jim.
And I think that spills into one of the other points you mentioned, which is like this idea of if you're going to start building relationships and trying to get in touch with people, that notion of like giving more than you take. And it sounds like even right off the bat, that's what you were doing. You went to someone in the business and you said, I want to give this thing to you, as opposed to saying, I have this idea for a show I want to put on. What can you do for me?
Yeah, I mean, really something like that. The tribute events are very collaborative. They have to be, or it's really not going to work. We did the first ever tribute to women wrestling with Trish and Amy and Little Egypt and Lisa Marie. I mean, we had everybody. We worked so hard at that show, to make sure we tried to touch every generation possible with what limitations that we had in terms of time. And of course, there's always a budget in mind, right? So like we gave the fans something truly special. We had people come from all over the country. We had a fan fly from the Middle East to attend that show. Like when I put that concept together, I did not even imagine that was going to happen. Like that blew me away. There's no greater compliment than somebody who will fly across the globe to see your show as an independent pro wrestling company. So that show put us on the map, I feel more, it just did. We had great momentum with Cornette, and then we had the women's event right after that. And that show is very special to me as a woman in the business. Helping honor people that I admired growing up it will always be probably my favorite show.
I want to talk more about that in a second. First, I actually want to go back to, you talked about you have to keep a budget in mind, right? So as you're recruiting talent for a show,
or casting,
when I say, right, yeah, right. Like you're pulling in pro wrestlers, like you're calling them up. I've got a couple questions in that line specifically. One, is it just like, hey, we can pay you this much. Do you want to do the show? Like, how are you pitching the wrestlers themselves?
I mean, usually you're either dealing with an agent or a wrestler directly. It just depends. And it's really just usually a professional email. It's not really like you can pick up the phone and call John Cena and say, hey, John, you want to work my show? But I mean, there's delicacies to it. You want to present yourself professionally. You have to remember these guys are getting pitched by people that really have no business promoting. There's people out there that will run a 20-person audience show. And that was never for me. If I ever got to that point, I'm going to walk away. There's a lot of time and energy and emotional investment to do something like this if you love it so much. So the moment I start doing a show, I am giving it my all every day, to make sure that it all checks out. Because at the end of the day, Masters of Ring Entertainment is signed by Bambi Weavil. I have to sleep at night. I have to know I gave it my best. And I think anybody in business, you created this LLC, you created this Inc. At the end of the day, John Doe, you signed up for this. So like you have to be prepared to take everything that goes along with it. The tears, the amazing feeling, the days you're upset because something didn't go right. Like it's a very human thing, but it's special. It's yours. It's something you did that you can be proud of, So entrepreneurs are a special breed. We all have that in common. We have to really get ourselves up and work because, if you don't do it, nobody else will.
One thing you've talked about that's been a theme throughout this episode has really been the idea of like knowing what your fans want. And I just want to take a step back from the conversation for a moment and talk directly to our listeners. Your fans are everywhere, right? Which includes your website. And knowing who's on your website is important. And so the question I have to ask our listeners is, do you hate Google Analytics? Maybe you're raising your hand right now. I know I have a lot of frustrations with it because understanding where and why I lose site visitors before they convert is hard. Because with Google Analytics, there's always this like integration challenge or sorting through a mountain of data just to figure out what's causing my leads to drop off. And again, these leads are like potential fans, right? And you got to know, what do they want and what do they like? And that's why I was excited to learn of a better way to measure website analytics. And that better way is Oribi. Oribi is a unique marketing analytics tool that captures all the events visitors perform on your website. And here's the kicker, without using code. So Oribi enables you to analyze visitor behavior patterns, build smart funnels, and get tons of insights so you always know what your next step is. And what does that mean? Finally, you're able to understand your visitors and then know what to change in order to convert them more or convert them better, which means no more operating your website with blind spots. To start your free trial, visit oribi.io/today. That's ORIBI.io/today. And as a partner of the show, you can use the coupon code HYPEMAN, HYPEMAN, all one word. Use the coupon code HYPEMAN for 20% off of any plan. That's oribi.io/today. And use the coupon code HYPEMAN for 20% off of any plan. Today on Startup Hype Man, the podcast, we are here with Bambi Weavil, the founder of Masters of Ring Entertainment. Now, Bambi, right before the break there, we were talking about this idea of like the fan experience and then how you use that first show as the launch pad to do your tribute to women in wrestling show, which is the first of its kind that's ever been done, right? Tribute show, all female card. Did you find then, like once you got that with the first show, Were you able to leverage the clout, let's say, that you developed from that to just start like dialing people up or sending out emails and saying, we want to get you on our card for this next show and it's going to be this thing?
I think it helped. You certainly want to reference who you've worked with in the past that would have a positive thing to say about you, be willing to back you up. I do that with people now, even 6-7 years later. I still reference, if you have any doubts, you're welcome to call these people. I do that because I want the, first time touching somebody in terms of an email or a phone call, that I'm legitimate and I'm willing to put my neck on the line, that I trust the person I'm referencing will tell you that it was a positive experience. So yes, it did help. And it really is, people don't realize, especially in pro wrestling, that first impression is everything, whether it's you shaking their hand at the meet and greet table or sending them an email because you want them on your show.
So that said, I think that leads into my next question really well, because I think when you're dealing with people who are considered important, right? And I'll tell you, I would consider, you have Kurt Angle coming up on a show. I would consider an Olympic gold medalist, someone who's in the WWE Hall of Fame, someone who had legendary matches, right? I would consider him to be someone who's an important person. So a lot of times I feel like people believe when they are meeting, when they're dealing with someone important, that you have to put on a front, if you will, to like appeal to them. How much would you say you have to balance this idea of like a front / professionalism with authenticity at the same time?
Well, for me, it's one and the same. I'm professional and I'm authentic. It's not a front. I'm going to treat you like I treat everyone else, but I also understand that these guys have been treated badly and you're recovering for people's past mistakes, even though I have nothing to do with somebody being burnt. That happens a lot in wrestling. You don't know what they've dealt with before they get in front of you to work your show. And every day is a new day. And that goes for any business. Some are more high profile than others. I will say that everybody I've worked with has been very professional, and it's like do unto others, the golden rule. It applies in everything you do. You, as a promoter or as a business person, you hold up your end of the deal. You can't be responsible for how it translates. You can only do what you're supposed to do and what is expected, and really rise above the occasion. I do my best to make sure these guys they're appreciated and they're going to be treated fairly, right, and sometimes exceed their expectations, and that's really important to me.
So with that in mind, then it is a relationship, right? You both need to make sure you get something out of this, and you're doing your part to, put your best foot forward for them. How do you ensure that it is a relationship that gets created and not just this like one way, almost like master servant kind of thing?
Well, it's like any freelance agreement, right? These guys don't work for you 300 days a year like they did the WWE. So really, it's important to do what it's agreed, whether they have a match or a meet and greet or both. They do their obligations. You see how they interact with fans. As a promoter, I have to make sure I do my part. Everything is the way a contract is laid out. That the travel accommodations are exactly spelled out the way they wanted it. And that it's a smooth event. It's a smooth event. You want it to be as WWE as you can. I really believe that because that's what they're used to. That's what they had. They experienced that corporate experience, and I do my best to give them that. I want them to have the creative freedom to work like they do in AEW. I find that to be a very strong suit of AEW, and be able to do what they need to do to be themselves and to give the fans what they can do as themselves as a brand. They are brands themselves, solo to masters. They bring themselves, they bring their value. I bring my value as a promoter to help bring fans in to see them. It's a win-win. You can't ask for anything more than that.
And is that how you then determine, like, when you see their work once they are appearing at that autograph signing or fighting in a mat, wrestling in a match on your card? Are you also then kind of like assessing based on how they've carried themselves throughout the process? Are you like kind of saying to yourself, yeah, this is going to be an ongoing relationship, or versus like, I think this will probably be the one time we have them on and we may not work with them again?
Well, you make that final thought after it's over. A show day for me, it's the day everybody arrives, which is usually the day before, depending on how it's booked. And then everybody went home and you go return to your home and you decompress. that's when you start figuring out what's the next step, because that's what happens. You just completed something you spent months working on. In my situation, I don't run every month. A lot of promoters run every month. I run currently once a year. I'm hoping to change that where it's more frequent now that I'm in High Point full time. But it is, of course, it's just like the independent wrestlers, the ones that are not on TV, who are trying to get to the big leagues, right? I judge them as much as I judge anyone else. How did they show up to the appearance? How often did they promote the appearance? How did they conduct themselves in front of myself, my family, my coworkers, the fans? Like, everything matters. It's just like any job or anything you show up to. How did you do? Like, it's nothing different. It's very much like, does this work? The fans show up for this? Do they pop meeting? Did they cheer for this? Did they react to this?
So it sounds like it's very much on both sides. It's very much a priority on placing ego to the side and really prioritizing the audience above all else.
Yeah, you have to. Your job at the end of the day is to serve the people buying tickets. For me as a promoter, I have to honor the people that I casted. Right? I brought them in. They didn't have to take my booking. They chose to. And it's a double serve for me. Make it right there, make it right with the fans.
Yeah. The final question I have before we hit our wrap up is, as you look at the landscape of professional wrestling, and I think what we're seeing now, probably more than we ever have in the past, if ever before, is this like, and I think because, the curtain has been lifted on the entire industry, is this like crossover happening, right? Where you're seeing different organizations collaborate with other organizations, kind of in the way, I don't know, like North Face and Gucci will collaborate on a new bag or a new jacket. You're seeing WWE acknowledge other leagues exist when they never really did that before, right? You're seeing AEW have like active partnerships with places like Impact. And then they're even bringing on Impact Wrestling's world champion onto their own TV, holding that belt. So how do you feel like what's your assessment on the future of wrestling in terms of relationship building at the corporate level, if you will, with other organizations, whether it's independent or fully established?
Well, I think just like in anything, you should choose your partners carefully to not oversaturate your message and to make sure that your brand equity is intact. So for me on the independent circuit, I keep my circle small. One of my best friends is Tracy Myers, who runs WrestleCade/AML Wrestling. And I work with him. I work with Hang Time with his academy as well, very closely in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I keep my circle small. I would work with AEW, I work with NWA if they permitted me. Impact Wrestling, I had done some stuff with the past in terms of working with their stars. We have Penta coming in from AEW, of course. So, you just have to be very careful on how you choose. Now, in terms of the big league, it's exciting to see these forbidden doors, like having Mickie James show up at the Royal Rumble, like never, ever, I didn't even ever think that would happen. It was a huge deal. Now it's starting to come more and more, which is great. I just hope it's always for the right reasons and that everybody gets something out of it.
Let's begin our wrap up. First off, Bambi, where can our listeners find you? Where can they find more? Where can they learn more? No pun intended.
We can go to mastersofringentertainment.com or morewrestling.com for short. We have a big event coming up on June 11th in High Point at Truist Point, the home of the High Point Rockers, the minor league baseball team. Very excited. It's our first show back in 2 years. So you can reach me there or on LinkedIn, and we're on all the social medias.
Bambi, who is one person who you want to give a shout out to? It could be some of your talent. It could be a coworker. It could be a professional contact, anybody.
Oh, wow. I just want to thank my team. I have a great support team with my family and some friends in the business like James Hunter, Tony James, Jason as well. I'm very blessed, and, you are nothing without your team. My team is growing. Behind the scenes, there are people like Stephen DeAngelis, our announcer, who is helping for this show and has been very supportive over the years. And I'm just very grateful for people that believe in our vision.
We will now do our top 1 or 2 lessons or takeaways for the listeners based on our discussion today. I'll go first, then I'll toss it over to you. Our topic today was building relationships with hard to reach people. My top 2 things that I wrote down, and there was a ton of good stuff in this episode. Like I have an entire page of notes here that I was jotting down during this. I think the 2 things that really stood out to me were, one, as you said, you have to live and breathe your pitch. It's not just something you say, it's something you live and breathe. The other thing that I had never considered before is whenever you meet someone, you are actually recovering from other people's past mistakes with that person. And it's not necessarily fair, but it is the fact, right? They have had some interaction in the past that is automatically coloring how they're going to interact with anybody in the future. And if you understand that out of the gate, I think it creates a certain extra level of empathy. And to be, I'm serious when I say I have never heard that. I've never heard someone say that before. I've never even heard that idea or concept before. So that really was game changing, the fact that you said that. Bambi, your top 1 or 2 lessons or takeaways for the listeners today on building relationships with hard to reach people.
I would say, number 1, you're always in selling mode. You're selling yourself, you're selling your dream, and they've heard it all before, except you're you. And you want to really dial in to what makes you special, what's your unique value proposition, as they say, right? Number 2 is be willing to be transparent, authentic, and understand that, like you said, it is true. You're dealing with people's wounds, just like you are in relationships when you date somebody, right? You're dealing with wounds. So you've got to be perceptive to know that it's not personal, but sometimes you have to really win them over and, be prepared for that. And at the end of the day, if you win them over, you're good. You're good. You did your job. You did what you're supposed to do. You overcame the odds. And in wrestling, it's very critical. It's something that we all deal with on an unconscious level, and just do your best.
My final question, which is how we end every episode on this show, fill in the blank, Bambi. Entrepreneurship is blank.
Worth it.
Say more on that.
Hey, it's a fill in the blank. No, it's worth it because, you get the time freedom, you get your creativity freedom, being able to go wherever you want, do whatever you need to do, and you control the outcome. It does require discipline and it requires drive. And if you have that, you can hang on, you can do it, and be prepared to pivot, be prepared to create new ideas the rest of your life. I think entrepreneurs dream big.
Entrepreneurship is worth it. She is Bambi Weavil, the founder of Masters of Ring Entertainment. Bambi, thank you so much for joining today on Startup Hype Man, the podcast.
Thank you. I had a good time.
That does it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and leave a rating and review in your podcast app, or do us one better. Hit the share button. Send this episode to one friend who you think needs to hear it. While you're on your way out, don't forget to follow Startup Hype Man on Instagram and LinkedIn at Startup Hype Man. And remember, you can also connect with today's guest as well. They left their contact info. They love hearing if what they shared helped you in any way. StartupHypeMan.com is the place to catch the full 17-season archive and learn all about how to pitch your startup. We'll see you next week, but until then, stay hyped. Raj Nation out.